Welcome to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you our 2014 CFL season preview for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We're going to see how the Bombers stack up versus the rest of the field this year in the CFL, and we're going to break down their offense, their defense, as well as their special teams. But first, let's start back by taking a look at the CFL draft to see how well the Blue Bombers drafted this past May.
The Bombers wanted to get athletic on the defensive side of the ball and brought in some solid prospects in this year's draft class with linebackers Jesse Briggs out of McGill and Aram Isho out of McMaster, and also defensive back Derek Jones out of Simon Fraser. But the offensive line was another focal point, and in my opinion, they grabbed the best offensive lineman in the draft in Matthias Golson out of Simon Fraser. Golson is a center that can also excel at guard. I'm a big fan of how he dominates in the running game and is also able to recognize and redirect stunts and A-gap pressure. I think Golson can make an immediate impact from day one along that Blue Bombers offensive line. The Bombers will be breaking in a new quarterback this year, as last season Max Hall, who's still on the roster, couldn't put a stranglehold on a position. Free agent signee Drew Willie comes over from the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where in limited duty he played exceptionally well. Now what Willie does great, he protects the football and always keeps the offense in positive down and distance type situations. Brian Brown comes over as well from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, but in my opinion he would be hard pressed to beat out Willie, who would finally get his first opportunity to be the guy, and I think he'll provide stability at the quarterback position, something that the Blue Bombers haven't had for the last 3 seasons. Last year, the Bombers had an excellent 1-2 punch in the backfield in Will Ford and Chad Simpson. Going this year is Simpson, who's still a free agent at press time, and that takes a little bit of the shine off the position, but it isn't a detriment because Ford is a guy that can easily be a 1,000-yard rusher because of his vision and his breakaway speed. If the Bombers still want to employ a 2-back system, then free agent signee Nick Grigsby out of Arizona will be asked to fill the void. Grigsby is in the same mold of Ford minus the elite speed, but still has enough speed to make the occasional house call. 3-year vet Carl Voney is still on the roster and still trying to fight for increased reps. So I think this is a solid position for the Bombers on offense. Slight question mark with the receiving core this year for Winnipeg. Gone is future Hall of Famer Terrence Edwards, and they'll miss his leadership, production, and second down conversion ability. Now, there's still some talent on the roster here with guys like Clarence Denmark, who was the team's leading receiver last season, big body Corey Watson, whose play made significant strides last year for Winnipeg. He and Aaron Kelly are 2 guys that I believe with consistent quarterback play could have monster years. Kelly is supremely athletic that doesn't mind sacrificing his body for the catch, and Rory Kohler was as consistent as they come at that position. The question is with the depth. The Bombers are banking on a bunch of new faces to step up and elevate this unit. Guys like Jason Barnes and Burt Reed, they are rookie free agents, and non-import Taylor Renard out of Acadia is a guy that was a 2-time AUS All-Star, and he has a lot of Corey Watson in his game. So the Bombers hope that production will match the potential of a guy like Renard, and this is one of the units on the team that cannot get off to a slow start this season if they want to have success this year. The Blue Bombers were just okay up front last season. Part of the issue was the play at quarterback, which could overshadow the effectiveness of a unit. I actually like what they have up front talent-wise. Getting Paul Swiston back at 100% is going to be huge, along with the addition of 2014 rookie draft pick center Matthias Golson. That already makes this a much better unit. Veterans like Patrick Newfield and Glenn January, they man the edges. January was an East All-Star last season, and both guys are very athletic offensive tackles. Guard Chris Greaves is a man on the inside and does a great job in the running game and should continue to excel in 2014. Now, while the numbers are a bit misleading, health and added depth and a little bit of consistency at quarterback will make this a much better functioning unit as a whole this year. This was an impressive, productive unit last year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This season, they lose 2 key pieces up front in defensive ends, Alex Hall, who had 17 sacks, and Kenny Maynard, who had 6 sacks. That's a lot of production to field. Defensive end Greg Peach did a solid job last year in a rotational role, but can he and Jason Vega, who returns to Winnipeg after spending the 2013 season in the NFL fill the void. On the inside, I'm a big fan of their defensive tackles, Brian Turner Jr. and Zach Anderson. Both guys aren't the biggest. Neither is above 280 pounds, but they win with quickness and technique, and the two combined for 14 sacks last year. They are a thin unit up front, and they will need guys like defensive tackle Jake Thomas and Keshawn Frazier to step up and provide quality depth. Big loss here with former first overall pick Hanock Muamba going to the NFL. Muamba was the leading tackler last year for Winnipeg and was becoming a bona fide star. That's a huge hole to fill, but the good news is that they still have Ian Wild back in the fold. But from a pure linebacker perspective, that's a lot of questions in the second unit. I know they'll play both Corey Banks, who's coming over from the BC Lions, a very good player, but he's a defensive back, as well as Desla Dunn as pseudo linebackers. But will that help from a run-stopping point of view? That's the question that still remains, which is why you'll see guys like Willie Mosley, who's a defensive end linebacker hybrid, 2014 rookies Jesse Briggs and Aram Isho have to play big-time roles this season. In my opinion, this is the biggest question mark on the defensive side of the ball entering the season for Winnipeg. The Blue Bombers definitely had to get better in the secondary after having one of the league's worst in 2013. Gone is their big-time playmaker Javon Johnson to the Ottawa Red Blacks, but in comes a very solid vet in Corey Banks from the BC Lions to play that linebacker H-back role. And there's some good talent here in place already with Johnny Sears, who's coming back from an injury. Alex Suber and Damon Washington are two solid H-backs, and free agent signee Chris Randall is entering his third CFL season and is coming off his best year yet from Calgary. Last year with Calgary, he had 4 interceptions. He's holding down one cornerback spot. You look at Desea Dunn. He played well as a rookie last year and will man the other linebacker spot opposite of Banks. So what can happen this year? Well, what can't happen this year is the blown assignments and the miscommunications that played these guys last season. The talent is definitely here, and I think you'll see a much improved secondary in 2014. Questions abound in the kicking game as rookie kicker Liram Hasrulahu is the only kicker on the roster, and the Bombers must have a lot of faith in him, and that has to bode well for his confidence moving forward entering the season. The punting duties are held by the dependable and the steady Mike Renaud, who does a great job with direction as opposed to power, a valuable weapon nonetheless. With Will Ford focusing mainly on his running back duties, look for second-year man Aaron Woods to handle the kickoff return and punt return job, and he was doing a great job last year prior to the injury that knocked him out for the remainder of the season. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic if you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Last year was basically a lost season. Now you have a new head coach, Mike O'Shea, new enthusiasm. You got better at the quarterback position with Drew Willie. Sound defensive players already in place. So this will already be a much better team in 2014 than it was last season. The cause for concern, like I mentioned before, the linebacker position. Gone is Hanock Muamba, a big-time piece to what they were able to do defensively in the running game. So there are some questions that have to be answered, and you also have to wonder about the consistency of the passing game. The road to the Grey Cup for the Blue Bombers goes as follows. Number 1, the passing game plays consistent throughout from game 1 to game 18. If Drew Willie and that receiving core can develop that chemistry early and throughout the season, that bodes well for the rest of the offense. And the run defense has to play a lot better in order for Winnipeg to have success. Remember, they have 2 lighter defensive tackles up front, so run defense will be an issue, a slight one, but they have to be stout in that aspect. And the depth across the board, offense, defense, special teams, has to play great minutes. They have to be a full-fledged, outstanding football team, not a few players here and there. Everyone on this football team has to play well in order for these guys to find themselves in Vancouver in November. I have the Blue Bombers finishing 5th in the West Division. A very talented team, a lot better, in my opinion, than what we saw last year, but still have a ways to go to catch up with the guys that I have ahead of them. Although they'll be vastly improved, they will compete for that final playoff spot in the West. And I also want to give a huge shout out to CFL fan forums for always showing football game plan support.